What is the state of the nation as we look ahead to President Cyril Ramaphosa addressing us tomorrow evening? We focus now on the expectations of business and labor. And here to unpack this, I'm joined by the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busisiwe Mavuso, Leadership South Africa CEO, and also we've got COSATU's first Deputy President, Mike Shingange, Black Business Council CEO, Hankima Taban, as well as the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, as well as Mavavi. Good evening to you all, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Let me begin with you. We expect the President to outline where the country is socially, where the country is economically, where the country is as far as the economic and reconstruction and development plan, and I suppose outline for us what are the constraints to that plan as far as what he has promised, the spectrum, as far as what he has promised, opening up transportation, as far as what he has promised in terms of all the reforms that we've been hearing for the last at least 5 years, if you're paying attention. Are you expecting to hear anything different?
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I think maybe let me just firstly acknowledge that this is indeed a difficult time for the President, who is tasked with reviving an economy that has been ravaged by state capture looting and economic mismanagement. And I'd like to think that in his own measured manner, he'll try and strike a fine balance between addressing the immediate priority of providing financial assistance to those most in need, while ensuring that the longer-term measures needed to get the economy onto a sustained growth trajectory are not derailed. So what business wants is for those measures to be implemented a lot faster, so that 2022 can maybe, just maybe, become a year of delivery. So, Thabo, political theatrics do not have place in tomorrow's SONA. We need to send out certain critical messages, and I think it's going to be very important for the President to affirm certain issues. So firstly, we are expecting as business that there should be a proclamation that there is an urgent need for structural reform, which involves a message that South Africa is open for investment. I know that I think in April or in May, I think we are going to have another investment conference. So if we are planning an investment conference 2 months, the State of the Nation address is going to be held 2 months before the investment conference. Surely you actually want to position, the investment conference that we're going to have, by ensuring that policy certainty and certain interventions to improve the ease of doing business are actually going to be put in place. That's number one. And number two, Thabo, I think we need a clear implementation strategy that demonstrates the importance of government's commitment to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, that identifies and calls for bids for bid window 5 and bid window 6, and really we need to really look at how do we put in place critical growth enhancing infrastructure projects as a catalyst for job creation. It is now underwhelming when South Africa says it is going to do anything, Thabo, because we continue to have plan after plan and implementation is never forthcoming. We have spoken about the spectrum for the past 15 years. We have made promises, I think, in the past 2 SONAs, and we have put dates, as to when the spectrum is going to be auctioned, and we have missed all the dates that were actually put in place. Yeah. So, Thabo, maybe just lastly, because I know there's my colleagues that are actually going to come through, I'll come in with the other issues later. I think the one other critical thing for us, Thabo, a clear message that law and order in our country is seriously compromised, and this will not be tolerated any longer. Yeah. Thabo, we need tangible progress on bringing those responsible for the July anarchy as well as the state capture projects to book. Investors require confidence that the government has the capacity and will prosecute and uphold law and order. You see, Thabo, this is important because if you look at what the 17th World Global Risk Report that was released on the 11th of January 2022 says, it highlights prolonged economic stagnation, it highlights unemployment, it highlights state collapse. It highlights failure of public infrastructure. It highlights the proliferation of illicit economic activity as the top risks facing South Africa. Now, we are going into an investment conference with those global risks that have been put out there for the entire world to see. Now, we need to therefore use this opportunity to bring in place or to really maybe announce interventions that will maybe allay the fears of investors and for those who are interested in coming to
let's hear the view of Labour. The last time you said he missed the mark. All these things that I suppose we keep on hearing have been outlined yet again by Sisbusi, ease of doing business. He mentioned that. In fact, he said something like, it's so easy now to open a business. You can do it in the comfort of your home just by simply pressing a couple of buttons. In a few hours, your company is registered. He says we are making progress towards the ease of doing business. He mentioned the investment conference, said we had raised 766 billion rands, I think, on our way to that target of 1.2 or 1.3 trillion. He's mentioned a couple of infrastructure projects, building of roads, one of which was being celebrated yesterday in Limpopo. These are all issues that he mentions every day. But you are of the view that these still miss the mark. One, because they fundamentally miss the education component. Two, they also miss the mark because we are still not beneficiating and not localizing production in the country. But obviously, there's a whole lot more that you think you would want him to hear, deviating from the usual.
Yeah, thank you, Thabo. You've outlined our issues so well, and thank you very much to also Minister Lindiwe Zulu for articulating what we believe the president should prioritize in his speech tomorrow. And let's just say, we're hoping that the president is reading the signals in the country. The signal number one is that his party have its back on the ropes. It is being deserted left, right, and center by the working class, the youth, the women, the urban population, and it is slowly becoming a rural party. With 70% of the population giving up on active politics and elections, he is in trouble because that is a powder keg. Those people are not represented by him, and he cannot claim legitimacy over them because they no longer supporting his party. That's the first signal. The second signal is that we saw the implosion, the powder keg in July last year, where the youth without shoes used the opportunity of political instability within the ANC and took the chance to go and get shoes for free, mattresses, food, everything that they can lay their hands on. That's a second signal. Any person who manages the country at that state of affairs where even that State of the Nation address will not be delivered in Parliament because lawlessness have now degenerated to the point that everything, even the symbols of countries' pride, are being touched. We suspect because of the internal crisis of unity and disunity inside the ANC. That State of the Nation will be delivered in the Cape Town City Hall. What a national embarrassment, and actually articulation of the state of the country that on its own is going to be. And here's what we want to hear. Not another repetition of some rituals, beautiful English pact, but we want him to acknowledge that based on the fact that the number one priority for South Africa is unemployment. And for goodness sake, you've got to admit that everything that has been done since 1994 has reproduced more unemployment in the country. Now, the unemployment records with 77% of those below the age of 24% unemployed is a disaster of unbelievable proportions. You must say that we have failed. Secondly, the measure must be what are we doing about the levels of poverty in the economy. We still have almost more than 2/3 of the country's population trapped in poverty. Thirdly, we must look at what has happened to inequalities. We remain the most unequal society on earth. And fourthly, we must look at what has happened to the other crisis South Africa is facing, corruption. But according to the Afro Barometer, the crisis of corruption have worsened under the leadership of President Ramaphosa. We have seen the scandal after scandal of people looting money that is meant to save people literally in the machines, in the ICU. They taking it for themselves with their families. Those are the 4 areas. If you do not address to us those 4 areas, then you are wasting your time. You're making us to listen to another ritual.
Frankie, from Black Business Council point of view, how do you think the president should be striking that balance, giving people support, as is being said, while also giving support to the economy for the economy to grow? What should he prioritize?
Ethan Tabo and the panelists and also the viewers, we should firstly recognize that we are in a crisis, in an unemployment crisis. And then for us, I think that should be the theme of the SONA and the theme of the next 12 months. And I think just to put the figures, I think sometimes when we put them in percentages, they don't sound like they are real figures. We've got 10 million young people unemployed, sitting at home every day doing nothing. And out of the 10 million young people, we've got 3 million of them with tertiary qualifications. So we've got people who've got the BComs, the SCs, and all those things, sitting at home, basically doing nothing. So from where we're sitting, everything must be saying this is how we're going to create employment, and then we all agree that for us as a country to create employment, that has been proven all over the world. You have to support small businesses. It's not the big business that are going to create jobs. We all know that. We need to support small businesses. And we've provided even the president with those proposals of what needs to be done. The first thing, because the thing should be employment creation, which means let's create jobs, but also let's retain the jobs that are already there. And then our focus is on small business to say the state owes small businesses more than 5 billion rand for what has happened in the past. And those people have provided invoices, they've provided everything, but they're just not being paid. So our focus is that let's pay those people. Can the president put a deadline that says, in 6 months' time, I'm going to make sure that all departments that are owing small businesses, they're going to pay them. And those ones who are not adhering to the payment of small businesses within 30 days, I'm going to make sure that also that happens. And those who are not doing it, because that is in the Public Audit Act, I'm going to make sure that there's consequence management. Just imagine what that will do. Because what is happening now, when small businesses are not being paid, what happens? They retrench people, which adds to that 10 million young people unemployed. They close their businesses, and then that will take us longer to actually recover the economy from the economic recovery and from the COVID point. So we said to the president, let's do that. But the other challenge that small businesses and business, women-owned business are facing is funding. Without that, we can have all the speeches all the years, but that is not going to unlock creation of jobs and the growing of the economy. So we're saying, why can't we take all the monies that are taken from companies for enterprise development. Why can't we form a fund with that money? And let's run that fund like we ran the Solidarity Fund. Solidarity Fund was run professionally with both business and government to then fund these small businesses. And we can make it in the form of grants, because most of the small businesses have been ravaged by COVID. So they don't need loans. They need they need grants. They need someone who's going to pump money into them in a form of investment. Why can't we do that? And if we do that, we will be able to create jobs. We'll be able to reduce the unemployment that we have. We'll be able to get young people working, and we'll be able to grow the economy.
Support small business to create jobs and be able to grow the economy. We'll start with Mike Shingange when we come back from the break from COSATU and hear what they would like the president to articulate on behalf of Labour, and particularly as members of the alliance as well. What are your views tonight? 072-110-5584. Tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. In Focus continues shortly.
The right to vote in free and fair elections and freedom of speech, many of us now take for granted.
I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African.
Honorable members, withdraw from the House.
Honorable member, you withdraw there.
Now is the time for each one of us to say, South Africa, send me.
Build up to the State of the Nation address happening tomorrow evening. I'll be rolling coverage here on the channel all day tomorrow, plus of course taking that delivery live and some analysis afterwards. We have with us Busisiwe Mavuso, Mike Shingange, Khankima Tabane, as well as Zwelinzi Mavavi, and your views tonight on 072-110-5584. Mike, good to have you with us. When you came out of the ANC Lekgotla a couple of weeks ago, one of the issues that were raised by COSATU was expedite this finalization of the minimum wage. That particular matter, the Department of Labour saying it has now been gazetted, comes into effect, I think, the 1st of March, with a number of amendments. Key among them is that there's no differentiation as far as minimum wage is concerned between other workers and domestic workers in particular, which is something that you have been calling for, and certainly a win for you. But the other issue, of course, is this issue of the basic income grant. Now, there are, of course, various thoughts and questions around this. Business asking, okay, if you're going to announce that and that's the way you are going, how is it going to be funded? We hear today from Minister of Social Development that there seemingly doesn't have, there is no financial issue. Government does have the financial muscle to actually fund this. Where is it exactly going to be coming from? And do you expect the president to announce changes to the tax rate?
No, good evening, Tao, and my fellow panelists as well as the viewers. Well, first, on the issue of the 350, we certainly firstly expect that the president must extend it to beyond March, because as things stand now, it's supposed to come to an end in March. Our view is that all those people that are recipient and beneficiary of the 350 social relief distress grant are not going to suddenly wake up on the 1st of April finding jobs, or even for the next year, given the rate at which jobs are being lost on a daily basis. So we expect them to extend it. But we also hope that finally we'll extend it to what we call a food poverty level, because the 350 marches is bringing some relief to some population of our country. We think that if it was increased to around 640 or so, it will take us somewhere else as a basis for us to start the debate and implementation of the basic income grant. That's the first thing that we expect. But look, we move from the premiers, that says this is the 50th or the 6th State of the Nation address of President Ramaphosa. And just last year, he had outlined the plans of his government on how to tackle the corruption, on how to rebuild the state, on how to build the economy, and deal with the ailing SOEs. Our view is that today or tomorrow we expect no new things, but an account and the progress on how far are we as a country, particularly his government, in implementing that which he promised the country last year. Because it will be of no use for new visions, new plans, whilst we have not moved a quarter in implementing that which the country was promised last year. Our view is that the issue of Denel, the issue of EPRASA and Transnet, which themselves deprive, for instance, the issue of mining, the agriculture, and even workers to reach their destination in time and safely. You will note that we have what is called the Economic Recovery and Reconstruction Plan that has been concluded and net-led by social partners. But to date, we think that it's very lessly resourced by both government and even by business. We will want an account or a progress on that part, because that's a plan that we promise that at least under the current pandemic, this is going to be something that's going to help us to rebuild our economy. Unfortunately, if we're not careful, it's going to turn up like any other many plans that were brilliant for that never saw the day of the light. If we sit here, we're still facing a crisis of ESCOM. You know that social partners have concluded is an energy social compact, energy compact, which to date is not the kicking off the ground. Yeah. That is one, for instance, Labour will have committed its share of part in terms of making sure that we rescue the country's economy from an unreliable and unsafe a supply of energy. Because without us dealing with that, every other dream we have about rebuilding the economy will not happen if we don't have a reliable and a constant supply of energy. And of course, we've made the point that much as we have the issue of the state capture and the reports that are up, which we think that the government progress from tomorrow must announce the plans of dealing with that, including if there needs to be new legislations in order to make sure that the law enforcement agents move with speed to bring those to book. Right. But it must be understood that the problems of the economy we have today, they didn't only start because of the state capture, and of course they didn't only start because of the pandemic of coronavirus. It started because of the policies, the economic policies, macroeconomic policy, for instance, that this government has been following for over the years since 1994. They have been refusing to listen to some interventions that have been proposed by many social partners and South Africans as the way that we're supposed to move in terms of strengthening our economy.
Let's talk about those interventions. A quick one, Mike, in a minute, and then I'll get Sisbusi to respond. So I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. Do you think government should continue to play a role in key sectors of our economy? State playing a role in key sectors of our economy. You mentioned two. You mentioned, for example, Transnet, right? Do you think private players should come in and sort out the ports, right, so that we can begin to move goods? For example, the citrus sector, once those ports working, so that they can begin to move and hire more people, create employment. Two, the energy sector. You yourself have mentioned that there are massive challenges there. Do you think government should continue to play a role in those key sectors?
In fact, all the SOEs that were used before to build this economy that we have today during the time of apartheid are a key SOEs that the government can use and that they have to leverage in order to intervene in the economy. There's no evidence in this country, Thabo, that says any other state or enterprise that was owned by the state that went into the private hands has performed better in the economy and helped to save jobs or even create more jobs. Our view is that in the absence of the investment by private sector, you need the state to be in charge of Transnet, to be in charge of PRASA, to be in charge of the energy supply of this country, so that those goods that are needed to be transported, be it agriculture or mining, including the trains that are used to transport millions of workers to go to work, which they arrive at work very late when they are not there, when the trains are delayed. They arrive at work, they lose their salaries, but also the companies lose the production on that day. We think that can only be guaranteed by the state. And if that was to happen, our view is that even when the private sector will be in the investment strike, as we've seen over the many years ago, now the economy will still be going, the jobs will still be created. At least the basic services that are needed for our communities will still be serviced provided by the state.
Let's hear Busi respond to that. Quick one, Sis Busi. Where is the investment? You can unmute there for us. You want an investment strike? Get a sense that private sector saying the role of the state should be minimized in these key sectors. Let us come in, let us invest. We've got the money, but we're not seeing that money.
You know, Thabo, I absolutely don't agree with Mike in as far as the role of the private sector is concerned. You see, even if we want to keep some of these entities, you know, in the hands of the state, the reality is that under the state, all of them are dysfunctional, all 743 of them. Not even one of those entities are paying government a dividend. Instead, they are actually draining the fiscus. Instead, the money that should be used to alleviate poverty and unemployment in this country goes to funding, you know, these SOEs. So when our elected leaders steal food parcels from the hungry and PPE from the sick and dying, we know for sure that we have lost it. So I think it's all good and well to be idealistic in terms of what ideology do you want to drive, you know, and how much government intervention needs to actually be present in as far as these things are concerned. But once we have consistently proven, you know, that government is failing at this, we cannot continue on the same strategy. Surely you need to change gears and change tact and say what is going to work, you know, under the current environment, because the status quo simply is not sustainable. So private sector intervention is needed, you know, whether government likes it or not. You know, they need the assistance of the private sector. The reason why we are calling for investment, the reason why there is investment conference after investment conference is precisely because we are trying to raise capital from private hands. And it's precisely because government is not in a position to provide the capital that is required to actually recapitalize.
Yeah. But why are we only seeing pledges? Why are we never really seeing this money come in and these infrastructure projects taking off?
You know, you just need to look at where we are sitting in as far as the environment within which business is operating and to what extent it is actually being made conducive. Look at the ease of doing business in this country and look at where we are sitting in comparison to other countries in the world. You will see that our situation continues to get worse. Now you see, Thabo, capital is like water. It flows and follows the path of least resistance. So if this government is going to continue to make it difficult for capital to land in South Africa, we have to remember that South Africa is not the only party in town. We have to remember that the interest in South Africa is in as so far as it gives the gateway to the African continent. The interest of capital and business in this country is in as so far as it can engage or get into South Africa to access the 1.3 billion people that are there in the continent. So if South Africa is not going to make or allow a conducive environment through policy certainty, through policy clarity, then the capital is going to land in Kenya, capital is going to land in Tanzania, capital is going to land in Rwanda. And we are seeing that happen because we are failing, you know, to actually deal with some of these things that we've been talking about for quite some time. And I think these are the things that, you know, have been highlighted throughout this conversation.
We'll take a break. We'll come back in a moment. Capital follows the path of least resistance. keen to hear what Newzroom Afrika has to say about this. Capital saying optimize industry returns, and then we will plant more into this particular sector. We'll take more of your views as well. 072-110-5584. Tweet us at Newzroom405.
The right to vote in free and fair elections and freedom of speech, many of us now take for granted.
I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African.
Honorable members, withdraw from the House.
Honorable member, you withdraw there.
Now is the time for each one of us to say, South Africa, send me.
Welcome back. Live with us here tonight on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Some of what has been said previously at the State of the Nation address in 2021. The president emphasizing that jobs will come more from the private sector than they would come from the public sector, and therefore there needs to be work done to ease the process of doing business in South Africa. Tatu Vavi, capital follows the path of least resistance, meaning that we need to optimize the industry returns, because when we do that, they will plant more into the country and more people will be employed. How do we optimize? Make radical changes to education, one. Change the labor relations regime. Give incentives for businesses to hire. What's your take? Should the President make any announcements on these?
Just to comment on the previous discussion, Mike is absolutely correct. We need an active developmental state that is going to crowd in private investment in order to redirect the energies, not just of the private sector, but of the entire society towards an economy that is based on meeting the most basic needs of society. But Musi is right in saying that this government has failed us in relation to how it has managed each and every of the state-owned enterprise. But she is not right to then cast aspersions on the entirety of the role the government should be playing in terms of ensuring that there is development and that basic services can be provided, as the history has shown us that they were provided perfectly well. We at some point had the cheapest electricity in this country. At some point, we had a railway system and network that was providing transport to workers. At some point, we had a well-beating arms manufacturing industry and company. At some point, we had everything. We had an ISCO, we had a SASOL in the state hands, perfectly working. The problem is not government in general terms. The problem is the ANC government that has been hollowed out by corruption, that has proven to be incompetent, and that is driving us towards a failed state and a banana republic. So let's call things with their real names. What we must remove is the ANC as the government, and not the idea that the government must provide services to the most marginalized, that if it doesn't, will be left in the margins of society by the private sector. So for that, I must make that point.
Right.
Yes, Yes,
unfortunately, because of time, I've got to take the other panelists. Hanki, let me bring you in here. Quick one. Your views as the Black Business Council on the localization framework that was announced last State of the Nation address. For example, there are 1,000 items or so that were identified that should be procured locally. Did it benefit the small businesses at all?
Yeah, thanks, Tabo. Maybe before I get there, let me start with the issue of SOCs. I think it may be the majority of the SOCs that are not working and functioning well, but it's not all of them. Okay? Maybe let's not generalize that to that extent. And I think the model that can work is a hybrid model where the state still plays its role and the private sector adds. To give you an example, in the telecoms industry, for example, the two main players own, I think, more than 98% of the economy. But when we look at the rural areas are not serviced because capital also looks at the return on investment. So we cannot allow a situation where then the schools are all private, the electricity is private. It will mean that the poor people who are mainly black are going to be excluded from the system. Coming back to your question, it's important that the president also puts the words into action, and I agree with on implementation. We've been talking about localization for a long time. We consume the highest HIV medication in the world, but we don't have a manufacturing or local production in South Africa. And those are the things that we need the president to address. And I think that can be made possible, for example, with using the public procurement to then give opportunities to black businesses, to women-owned businesses, to businesses owned by youth and people with disabilities, to get them into the sector. They're already there. It's just to give them more support so that they can manufacture things that we use here in South Africa and where the majority people using them, instead of creating jobs elsewhere. Hence, our theme is that we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we focus on creating jobs and making sure that the jobs that are there are preserved. We should not be doing anything else that is going to increase unemployment.
All right, let's
hold
it there because of time. Mike, let me give you the last minute here for us. You've called for the president to double investment in the presidential employment scheme. How else do you expect employment to be created?
Yes, we mean that since the job summit and the commitments that we've made in the ERRP, only government has provided around 550,000 jobs, but we think that we need to double them to at least a million. So surely funding must be made through the treasury into that. But over and above localization that we agree with the panels here, we also, and the issue of the SMEs, the small businesses in the rural townships are the ones that were the hardest hit during this pandemic. We think that we need to find a way to resuscitate them. And lastly, we think that the president must urge his government to move away from austerization of the state and the economy, because that will suffocate the local economy by every time cutting on the resourcing the public service, while on the other hand you talk about the capable state and also the professionalization of the state, while you do not resource it in terms of the staffing, in terms of the infrastructure and all the things that they need. If you don't resource police, if you don't resource hospitals, even the fight against pandemic is going to be a pipe dream for us. If you don't resource police, even the fight against crime and corruption is going to be a pipe dream for us. We think that they need to start cutting down the public service, because in that way they are decapacitating the state in order for it to service the ever-growing population of South Africa.
Right. Completely out of time. Mike, we're going to have to leave it there. I appreciate your time and for coming on tonight. Sisibusi, Hanki, as well as Dadu Vavi. And when we